Hello, everyone. I'm going to give folks a few minutes to start logging on. See people joining while we wait. My name is Mary, and I'm with Fairy Godboss. If you are up to it, would love for you to drop in the chat where you're tuning in from today while we give everyone a few seconds to log on before we get started. Denver, cool. We are glad that you are here, Wendy. Thanks for joining us. I'm coming to you live from my kitchen table in Brooklyn. Any other New Yorkers on? Ooh, Las Vegas, Queens. Great. Perfect. Well, we are going to go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, my name is Mary, and I am with Fairy Godboss. For those of you who don't know, Fairy Godboss is the largest career community for women, and we offer women a ton of free resources to help advance their career, whether you're looking for a new job, need support or advice, or looking for tactical information on how to negotiate your next raise. We are here for you. A few housekeeping things. The chat is on, so feel free to use it. We'll also save time at the end for questions. And with all of that being said, I am so excited to turn it over to my colleague and Fairy Godboss's VP of Sales, Maura Bradley, who is going to share her insights on how you can land your dream sales job.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary. I think my screen sharing is disabled. Maybe you can help out with that. And
that is an issue. Yes, I can help out with that.
In the meantime, though, I am coming to you from a guest bedroom in South Jersey, where I've been working since Fairy Godboss went remote in March. So I think I might have access now.
You might have it now. Sorry about that.
Worries. All right. So let's get this going. And Mary, if you can just confirm that this is showing in full screen.
Yes, ma'am. You are all set.
Great. All right. So we will get started here. I'll give an intro of myself, spend about 25, 30 minutes going through some advice that I have as our VP of Sales on 5 things that you need to know to land your dream sales job. I'm fortunate enough to have my dream sales job. Mary gave a little bit of background of what Fairy Godboss does, but we are a mission-driven company that is focused on helping the community in their careers to get better jobs, to share information, to help build a community, but also really to help companies diversify their pipelines so that we can see more women growing into leadership roles and diversifying different types of positions that typically are very male dominated. So if you think sales and tech, but today we're going to be talking about sales. So a little bit of background is I had sort of a circuitous journey into sales. And I think you see that a lot with salespeople. They kind of find their way into sales. They don't grow up thinking I'm going to be a salesperson. But that being said, I started actually thinking I would be an actuary. So I went to school for math. I graduated, got a job at a big, huge insurance company, going into the actuary path, and then ended up deciding that wasn't for me and getting into a sales role at an early startup company, kind of growing within that organization, seeing a lot of different changes that happen as the company grew, as the sales team grew. And then most recently moved to Fairy Godboss to start my journey here. So very excited to be here. Again, today we're going to be talking about how to go about landing your dream sales job. So I've basically, there we go. bucketed the 5 kind of categories of what I think would be most helpful as you're thinking about how to land this next job. So the most important, and where I'll sort of spend the most time, is without a doubt this first piece of what are you actually looking for? What does that mean? How do you make sure that you find something and go after something and spend a lot of time and energy trying to get this job? Does it really a fit for you and what you're looking for? So then we'll go into who are you talking to during this process, and how are they able to help you kind of move your journey forward. Third thing, preparation. We'll go a little bit more into that. Spend some time talking about the interview itself, which obviously is a very important piece of this. And then what are some best practices for following up to make sure that you are actually able to land this? So to start out, what I really, can't recommend enough is to do some internal soul searching. So what does that actually mean? Essentially, if you don't have the clarity on what you're looking for, that's really going to come across in any interview that you go to. So how I recommend thinking about this is at a really, really high level. What is your why? So what motivates you to go and be successful at whatever you're doing as part of your day job? And then what really fulfills you? So why are you doing it? Is it because you're supporting your family and really at the end of the day, you need a paycheck and you're going to do whatever you can to make sure that commission check is as high as possible every month? Or is it just something that you measure yourself on your own successes, and you have these really clear ambitions and dreams that you want to live up to for yourself? Whatever it is to do a deep dive and kind of understand like what it is that would make you happy and would be fulfilling for you. Sales jobs can really run the gamut of what they're like, right? So one person's dream job could be another person's nightmare and vice versa. So to really get that clarity, I recommend thinking about these 2 questions. So in the past jobs that you have had, when were you the most happiest? So it might be the case that you worked at a job for 5 years and 2 of those years were fantastic. You couldn't wait to go to work. You were really motivated. You were really enjoying what you were doing. So what did that look like? And when you are thinking about that, think about things like, what was your relationship like with your boss? How much access did you have with your direct manager? Did you like that? Did you not like that? Was there a team dynamic that you really enjoyed and liked? And maybe that's something that you didn't realize is really important to you, that in any position you are able to thrive off the energy of a supportive and collaborative team. Maybe it was access to influence the strategy of the team or the company. So maybe you were in some kind of leadership or team lead position where you really felt like your voice was heard, and you were able to, not just, follow order, so to speak, but really go about influencing where the team's direction was going. And then how were your goals determined and hit? Were you setting them yourself? Was it something that was kind of top down set for you? Were they realistic goals that you could actually achieve? Were you hitting them consistently? What was it that was making that position a positive experience for you? And then the other piece of that might be like uncertainty. So I'll talk through in the next slide what types of roles and companies you could distinguish as you're going through your research process. But early stage companies are going to come with a lot more uncertainty. So is that something you like and thrive off of, or is that something that really makes you uncomfortable? And to the next question on here, if you did take the wrong job, say you took, this next job today, and 6 months from now, you're thinking to yourself, wow, this is really the wrong move. What would that look like? Would you be in a situation where you're being micromanaged to the point that it's making you really unhappy? Would it be that you're in a situation where you're not able to meet the goals that are being set for you? What are the things that would really make you realize this was the wrong thing? And then you can build them into your process as you're looking for what's next. And the other part of doing internal soul searching is talking to as many of your peers as possible. So people that you used to work with, ex-colleagues, friends of friends. I have an alumni group for the university that I went to, as well as the high school that I went to. So talking to different people that are in sales themselves, that have worked at different companies, that have had a lot of different experiences, and what they've enjoyed at companies, and how that can reflect back to what you're looking for. Great. So again, this is still in that first stage of knowing what you're looking for. So what type of company is it that's going to create that fulfillment for you? So some of the pieces that are really important as you're looking at this are the size of the organization. A lot of times there might not be a direct correlation, but they're really fairly correlated, is the size of the organization and the impact that you can have on the company overall. So think about that when you're looking at the type of company that you want to work for. If it is a privately held company, where are they in their funding journey? So the startup kind of path generally is a seed investment round, followed by Series A, followed by Series B, Series D, skip Series C, skip Series C and Series D. So each of those steps in that startup process is gonna reflect on a very different type of culture, different type of environment that you're actually working in. For example, a company that just has seed funding or Series A funding is going to be, you're going to be dealing with a lot more of that uncertainty that I mentioned in the previous slide. So is that something you're okay with? Do you want something that is more solid and predictable? In that case, maybe you want someone that's further along in their journey, or just a public company. And then what type of product? So what type of product are they selling? Is it something that you can really get behind? Does that matter to you, or does that not matter to you? I think it's very possible that it doesn't necessarily matter. And as long as you're at a company where you can make an impact, you really like the team, the product isn't as important. Or maybe you say, this is how I would be, if this isn't something that I can really get behind and spend, a majority of my day thinking about, talking about, then that's probably not something that would be a fit for me. Same thing with industry. Is this a move that I'm trying to make to get out of an industry, to pivot into a different industry? And do I know what specifically that is? Or are you looking to stay within the same industry and maybe just focus on a different product, or even a competitive product to what you're selling now? And then specifically into the role itself. So once you've identified like the size and type of company that you're looking for, what is their sales motion? So their sales motion would really be a combination of, how does their sales process work? What type of sales methodology are they using? Is it more of a transactional sale where you're responsible for a huge amount of opportunities per month, but they're generally a lesser contract value? Or is this a long game where contracts are generally not signed for 6 months, 9 months, or even more? So that's going to be really important when you're looking at what type of role this actually is. And then who are you selling to? A lot of times, even if you're looking to pivot out of a certain product line or industry, if you can find something where you're selling into HR, say, because that's what we do here at Fairy God Boss, I'll use that example pretty consistently. Is there a role you can find that's still within that industry where you are still able to call on old contacts that you have because you've been selling them something that might not compete directly, but is still within their realm? And then how important is consistent support for you? Do you really need to be able to lean on a manager, meet with them regularly? If you're if you're looking for one of those more early stage companies, or as you're going through the interview process, find that there is a manager with an enormous team where they're just not able to have the bandwidth to kind of give you the level of support that you know you need. That's something to keep in mind as well. Sorry, a bit of a delay here. And then where are you right now, and where are you looking to go? So if you're an SDR right now, what kind of path are you looking for? Do you want to become an account executive? Are you thinking eventually you'd like to be in sales leadership? Or are you looking for an SDR role so you can get to know the outbound demand gen function a bit more, so you can go more into the marketing demand gen side? As you think about that, think about what your next job might look like after this next step. And I think if you work backwards from there, that can help you identify what this first step should look like. So as you're looking at this overall, it relates actually pretty well to how in sales we think about our ICP, or our ideal customer profile. So for Fairy God Boss, for example, when we're selling to companies that are looking to diversify their recruitment pipeline, we're really looking for companies that are more than 1,000 people, that are hiring for 100 or more corporate positions, and they have some kind of D&I strategy in place. So as you're looking for what job might be the best fit for you next, you can do the same thing. You can narrow it down to who actually is the size company, the stage company that's going to be the best fit for me. And that'll save you a lot of time and energy in the long run as you go about this process. So the next kind of bucket here is know who you're actually talking to as part of this interview process. And again, there's a lot of similarities with a sales process and an interview or job hunting process. So I'd encourage you to treat the interview and the preparation for the interview similar to how you would a sales pitch. So research as much as you can, as much as possible, not just about the company, but really about the context that you'll be speaking to. Try to understand why they might be hiring. Are they replacing someone? And if that's the case, do they need someone as soon as possible? If they're just trying to replace someone and get someone ramped really quickly, during your interview process, maybe you can emphasize how you have the ability to learn really quickly and give examples of a time where you've picked something up really fast. If part of the interview process is going to be speaking to colleagues or team members of a team that you're going to be a part of, ask them early on in the conversation what is challenging to them day to day, and then that will help you navigate your answers so that they can identify that you actually would be able to bring something new and constructive onto the team. Similarly, I think we all, probably know, if we're in sales or looking to get into sales, how to do background research and try to find information on prospects, whether it's companies or people. But can you go a step further? Can you find someone on LinkedIn that maybe recently left a company that you're looking at? Can you reach out to them and just ask for a quick chat over coffee to talk through what their experience was like? With things like that, and I have done this before, and it actually ended up being super helpful. The person that I connected with actually was still very close with the VP of sales at the position I was applying to, and let him know that I had reached out, which ended up helping me in the interview process. But got to be careful with this one. If it is someone that left on bad terms or for a really specific reason, just got to be careful to take that type of advice with a grain of salt. And then as you're looking at, again, each person that you're talking to, what are their day-to-day pain points? So what are they thinking about each day? Why is it important to them that they hire you? And that can help, again, navigate your conversation, help with the follow-up, and give you kind of a broader sense of where you are in the grand scheme of things. So preparation for the interview is obviously key. So some advice that I would have for as you're going about your preparation process is, especially if you're doing a lot of interviewing, make a time investment really early on to perfect this resume overview story. Almost any interview that you go to, no matter where you are in the interview process, is going to ask you to either tell me about yourself, or can you give me some background about your work experience? This is a really important part of the interview, as it sets the tone for the rest of the conversation, as well as kind of helps give a sense of your storytelling ability. So this is not where you should be reading bullet points off of your resume. Everything that you say during this resume overview part, beginning part of an interview, should really be crafting a story. So that means there should be a beginning, which is maybe why you originally got into sales, or how you started your sales career and why. What motivated you to do that? A middle, where you go through some of the achievements or promotions that you have accomplished as part of your career history. And then what the next logical plot point is. Very likely it's going to be a job at the company that you're interviewing for, right? But there should be a really logical reason as to why that is. And it doesn't always have to be linear, right? It could be that your previous position, you came to a realization where you wanted to pivot a little bit, but that's why you decided to interview at this company. So again, it might seem like the easiest question you can get in an interview, but it is really, really important. And if you can, I'd even recommend videotaping yourself saying it so that you can see how it sounds, make sure that you're coming off really clearly. And then again, the 360-degree research. So that's where you're looking into not just the company itself, but the industry that they operate in. So who are they competing against? What is their USP or unique selling proposition? If it's an industry that you haven't worked in before, or a product that you haven't sold before, you might not be able to fully recreate a sales pitch without knowing the ins and outs of the product features, et cetera. But before your call, try to summarize what that USP might be prior to going into the call. It'll be good practice, and you can even check with your interviewer early on in the process that you have an understanding of what they're selling. Sorry. Okay. And then you can't anticipate every question that you're going to get in an interview, unfortunately. However, you can identify 10 to 12 key anecdotes about your career history and know them really, really well in and out. So then at that point, you'll be able to relate them to different questions that are asked. So for example, if you took on a stretch project where you had to pick something up really quickly, you had to work with limited resources, and at the end of the day, you were successful with what you set out to accomplish. That's an anecdote that could fall into a lot of different categories, question categories with your answer. So if you can prepare them ahead of time, that's going to help you a lot as you go through the process. So where should you focus some of these anecdotes? These are some buckets that I've identified where a good portion of sales interviews tend to steer towards. And they're motivation, passion, resilience, sales motion and methodology, consultative ability, and then achievement. So some examples of questions that you could get here and why they're important is a lot of times in sales, we're self-motivating. So we are working specifically because either that commission check is important to us or seeing ourselves at the top of a leaderboard is important to us. But that intrinsic motivation is something that's going to come up in a lot of interviews. So a question around this would be, have you ever been at that middle of the month or quarter and you've already hit quota? What is going to keep you going is a question that I've asked in interviews before. Resilience. For example, I like to ask about what the hardest job that you've ever had. And this could be a professional job or not a professional job, but you're looking for someone that is able to kind of overcome some kind of obstacle and be able to tell a story about it. About how they came through. Similarly, I would be prepared to talk about a failure. I've asked in many interviews, tell me about a time when you failed. And with that, really, you're looking for someone that has the self-awareness to admit that they have failed in the past, and then see what they learned from that and how they're able to grow from it. Passion. Passion can either come across really well in an interview or it's really hard to get across. So something here that I have asked in the past is, what's something that you're passionate about and can you teach me something or teach me about it in like a few minutes here? And that's when you can really kind of come across as caring about something either sales related or non-sales related. Being consultative, any kind of sales company that's selling to either mid-market or enterprise, even SMBs, and especially with software, it's really important that you emphasize your ability to be consultative. So I would be prepared to talk through a specific deal where you were successful, maybe a deal that you weren't successful as well, and are able to talk through what you could have done better or differently. And then I can't emphasize enough achievement. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that would make a salesperson a great colleague, a great teammate. But sales, it's really easy to gauge success. And that really is hitting numbers. So if you're not able to talk through examples where you either hit a quota or you hit another kind of goal that was set for you, consistent achievement of KPIs, that's probably going to be an issue during the interview process. And then I'll talk about sales process a bit more in a second, but as far as sales methodology, a sales methodology really is more of a philosophical framework of how you go about your sales process. And a lot of times these are concepts that are trained on in your previous sales roles. So examples would be the challenger sale, spin selling, solution selling, even consultative selling. There's some training on that. With these, it's not necessarily one right answer, but it's more of just being aware that these methodologies are out there, being able to speak to one that resonates most with you or one that you've been trained on in the past. And if you haven't heard from any of them, about any of them, that's fine too. There are plenty of books on each of these methodologies, specifically spin selling, the challenger sale would be good places to start. So on to the interview. I always would say that you should treat this interview like a sales call and the interviewer like your prospect, right? Where you're selling your ability to help this team be successful. I feel like I did skip a slide. Yes. So here's a few kind of tips for the actual interview itself. One is now that we all are in this Zoom world, well, most of us, it depends, I think some locations in the country are back in the office, but find out beforehand, before the interview, whether this is going to be a Zoom call or whether you're going to be taking a phone call. And if it's a Zoom, make sure that you find an appropriate space where you'll have quiet. You'll be able to connect. If you can use a laptop, that's even better. Sometimes Zoom on phones can be a little wonky. And then make sure that you're finding a way to connect, even though it's via video. So use eye contact. In a lot of situations, I know for us, most of our sales calls are done via Zoom. So it's almost a try out in how you, the presence that you have while you're on video, as much as it is to the actual content that you're answering with. We'll go into a little more detail on this talk to listen ratio, as well as the sales process, but also just general energy. Again, everyone kind of has this Zoom fatigue. And if you're interviewing for a place where you're going to be on Zoom talking to clients, you want to make sure that you have a noticeable energy that's coming across despite the unfortunate kind of technical situation that we're in right now. And then before the call itself, follow up with the person that is going to be interviewing you. Maybe the call was set up by a recruiter, or whether that's a third-party recruiter or an in-house recruiter. But follow up, or it's weird to say follow up before the call, but reach out before the call and ask if you should prepare anything specific, confirm that the time still works, and whether or not it's going to be a Zoom or a dial-up call. Whoops. So this talk to listen ratio, again, I'm sort of following a theme of the interview as a sales call, but HubSpot has a lot of information on this. I believe Gong does as well, but they analyzed like, I don't know, a zillion calls, sales calls, and the close rates of each, and pretty much identified that there is a major gap between the top closers and the bottom 20% of sales reps on how much they're listening during a sales call. So as sales professionals, we might know that it's best to listen and let the prospect do most of the talking, and that should carry over to interviewing as well. It might depend on the interviewer's style, but chances are, as an interviewee, you're speaking a lot more than you think you are. The ideal talk to listen ratio on sales calls, as you can see on the left here, is 43% pitching to 57% listening. So how do you handle that if someone's just firing questions at you? Well, for one, you don't ever want to avoid answering a question. Even if it's something that you think about for a second, you think you have an example, you just can't think of it. It's okay to say, can I get back to you after this? Or I just can't think of a great example right now. You don't want to kind of avoid answering the question completely or kind of go off on a tangent that's completely irrelevant. But what you can do is follow up your answer with a really relevant and appropriate question. So if they've asked you something specific about your sales process, or maybe common objections that you get within your sales process, answer the question and ask if that was what they were looking for, but then also say, and I'm curious, what are the common objections that you get for this product, as an example. And that actually will help kind of keep that conversation flowing and stop creating this kind of question answer fire away format. And be genuinely curious. Curiosity is such an important trait in a salesperson. So as you're going about the interview, be really curious, and as you ask questions, try to make them really thoughtful and asked with some earnest tone, so that it comes across that you really do kind of care and want to learn more about this. And so, yeah, if you do have to go into a longer answer, maybe you're talking through your own sales process or a specific deal, make sure you don't talk for longer than a couple of minutes before checking in with your interviewer to make sure they're still with you, especially if they're sitting on a Zoom call. Maybe they've been on Zoom calls all day. It's kind of easy for them, as much as we'd like to think we have their full attention, for them to start drifting towards another tab or something else. So just check in to make sure they're kind of still with you and following along. On that similar kind of point, if they're asking for an example of something specifically around the product that you sell or your sales process, try not to use an overly complex example. The interviewer, unless you're interviewing with a competitive product or something that's really specific to an industry that you're coming from already, you really don't want to go into the ins and outs of the product features or things like that. You can kind of keep it high level while still answering the question. And then at the end, make sure that you're closing as you would a sales pitch. So you can ask, are there any concerns that you have that would prevent me from moving forward in the process? And then make sure that you're crystal clear on what the next step is in the process. You could even ask, depending on how your conversation's going, did you have any advice for me? I know I'm speaking to Mary after this. Is there something specifically that she'll be looking for? And then something that comes up in most of the interviews that I do for sales rep roles are around the sales process. So it is really important that as you're going about your interview preparation, that you're really crystal clear on this sales process. I've asked this question so many times and people have kind of stumbled through these vague answers where, you know, it almost seems like they don't have the self-awareness to know what they're or how they work. So when I say sales process, I'm referring to the repeatable set of steps that a sales team or rep can take to move a prospect from early stage to closed customer. So this involves a few different steps. That's prospecting, that's connecting with the prospect, doing research, presenting or demoing, handling objections, and closing. So I'm giving two examples here of how you could talk through a specific sales process if you receive this question. So the first example is more for a transactional sales process. So almost maybe like a Yelp or something that's really transactional. And so here's the example. We have a 2-week sales cycle here. So each morning I find 30 new prospects through research and different newsletters, blogs, and resources that I subscribe to. I spend my day doing cold outreach, leaving voicemails, following up with email, and scheduling second and third touch points. I use SalesLoft to do this, or another outreach tool. Prior to a call, I research the contact, where they used to work, and a little bit about the business. I then tweak my presentation, which I give, talk through objections, and then ask for their business. I generally close 30% of my demos, which is the highest on my team. So this is a very clear to me what this person's sales process looks like. And that they have a really clear understanding of, if I slot them into my team here, how they could organize their day. Now, a different example, but again, talking through a specific sales process is more for a SaaS or software company. And it goes like this. I have a list of 30 named accounts. I prospect them, trying to cultivate relationships with business leaders in 3 main departments: D&I, recruitment, and employer brand. I try to make connections at the decision maker level, which is VP and above, and schedule at least 2 meetings per week. Following the initial discovery call, I asked to involve other stakeholders for a meeting where I customize a tailored pitch based on what I learned about the organization and needs during discovery. Following that pitch, I ask about the buying process, including timeline, and address any immediate concerns. Because I place such an emphasis on their buying process versus my selling process, I have the shortest average sales cycle on my team, which is 60 days. I then involve procurement and legal as early as possible to keep the deal moving. So this tells me a ton about what this person is doing as part of their day-to-day. I can see where it aligns with what our sales process is internally, and whether or not their experience could be a fit here. There's also a ton of follow-up questions that can come out of you describing or walking through your day-to-day sales process that could help kind of move the conversation, keep the conversation moving. And then the last or the fifth kind of thing here is that follow-up actually does matter. I can't tell you how many ex-colleagues and friends that I have that are in sales that kind of think these thank you notes after meeting an interviewer are sort of old-fashioned, or they get to it a few days after they've done the interview. And really, timeliness is key here. A lot of interviewing rubrics will actually include a follow-up as part of their assessment process. So being able to get that over quickly is going to be really important. You also want to call out where you think you could have improved. So self-awareness, I've talked about a few times on this call, and that is really, really important. So really acknowledge what didn't go well. If there was something that you think, wow, that's really going to be a hang up, or I didn't do a great job on that, or I said, can I get an answer to you after the call? So acknowledge what you did or didn't do great. And then also highlight specific moments or pieces of the conversation that you thought would be a really great fit. If this is someone that would make you a really great fit. If this is someone that is interviewing a lot of people or they're just generally really busy, which very likely they are, then you want to really point out like what those key positive takeaways and pieces of the conversation were so that they can be reminded of them when they receive your email. And I did include an example just calling out some of the things that I mentioned in the previous slide. So here's an example where someone wants to thank you for your time this morning. So excited about Fair Galbos before talking to you. And after our conversation, I'm more confident this would be the right fit. So that's where you're reiterating interest. It's a two-way process doing these interviews. So being able to indicate that you are still interested, you want the position is really important. And then connecting your abilities and what you talked about during the interview to what the pain points of that interviewer were. So for example, in this interview, we talked about how we want to increase the average time to close here on the sales team. So this person actually called that out in their follow-up email and how they could directly make an impact on that. And then a self-awareness piece where they said, I did need an extra few minutes to think about the creative prospecting strategy that you asked about, and goes on to give an example. And that's something where they didn't have an example when I asked them during the interview, but the fact that they thought about it and then followed up was really important. So in summary, we talked about spending a lot of time identifying what you're looking for, what type of role is going to make you happy, make you successful. And we spend a lot of time at our job. So being able to find something that's actually a fit is going to be extremely beneficial for you in the long run. So know who you're talking to and who your interviews are with. Prepare for the interview itself, researching the industry, the company, the competitors, as well as the people you're talking to. And then treat the interview itself like you would any sales call or sales pitch, followed by making sure you follow up in a timely manner. But lastly, if you don't get the job, don't beat yourself up. There's a lot of things you can do. Ask for feedback from the interviewer. Find out if maybe there's a fit down the line. There's a lot of reasons we don't get jobs, and one of them is timing. And so maybe there's a point in the future where it would actually be a better fit. Or maybe you can think about what you learned from that process and iterate on what you're looking for, that first piece, that first bucket that I talked about. So that's it. Thank you everyone for your time. I don't know if there's any questions, but happy to answer them while we're here.
Yeah, thanks, Maura. That was awesome. You have amazing gifts in your presentation. And B, I love the approach of treating it like a sales pitch because you're interviewing to be a salesperson. So really great info. We do have a few questions, so feel free to use the chat or Q&A, and we will just dive right in. Someone asks, can I ask who the interviewer thinks the company's main competitors are if they're not clear, or will that make me look like I didn't do my research?
That's a great question. I think you can do your best to research this ahead of time. If you can find information online on who they compete with, which it's very likely you could get a little bit of a sense, or if you really can't, I think it's completely okay to ask that during the interview process. If you want to take a guess, that works too, because maybe you're right. Or again, with that curiosity piece, it could help show that at least you've tried to do the research and you're curious about what the answer is.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I also think if you're not clear on who a company's competitors are, then possibly when you're selling, your prospects aren't clear either.
Exactly.
So this is a great question. What are your thoughts in finding the hiring manager and reaching out when the recruiters tell you that you're a great fit for the position and will set up the next interview and you never hear back, even when you try following up with the recruiter? In my opinion, it shows a salesperson knows how to get to the right person. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it totally depends what the hiring process of the company looks like. So if it's a hiring manager and you haven't had the opportunity to speak with them yet directly, I almost think you can reach out before you talk to the person below them or the other recruiter and just say, hi, I wanted to connect on LinkedIn. I'm going to be interviewing for this role with recruiter Dan. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you following that interview. Then at least you're on your radar. Again, you kind of get that message across that you're a salesperson. You're able to find the hiring manager on LinkedIn. Connecting on LinkedIn is a really soft touch, so I don't think you'll ruffle any feathers there. But yeah, I think you can do that early on in the process.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I would say is applicable to so many roles, not just sales. It shows that you're really eager and excited about the role and the company. We have another attendee who asks, how can I talk about a failure without damaging my reputation? Even when I talk about the lessons I've learned, I still feel like it makes me look bad.
It's all about how you describe the failure, right? So to me, the only things that would stand out as red flags in this situation is if the person answers the question and it revolves a lot around different excuses. So they're telling me about something that they failed to do, but for some reason, it really is because their manager failed to do this as well, or because their teammate didn't do something and it caused you to fail. So I would not be worried at all about damaging a reputation. Everybody has failures in life, and if you aren't willing to talk about one, to me that is really not a great sign for someone that's going to be a valuable member of a team that will be willing to collaborate and kind of put themselves out there and fail without feeling too self-conscious.
Yeah, absolutely. And some great advice I've received on how to answer that type of question when asked about your failures is to, say what the failure was, but then what you learned from it and what actions or changes you've made as a result of the failure.
Exactly. I think that's a perfect structure.
For sure. Okay, so we are getting close on time and we have one other question. So last call for questions if you have any for Maura. And so another participant asked, what are the 3 most important qualities you look for in a salesperson?
Great question. And if I can go back to the slide that I was using, really motivation, and that's like intrinsic motivation. So something where they are really clearly able to set a goal and are motivated to hit it. So being able to self-motivate is really important on my end. And then being consultative, so being able to not talk at a prospect, but really talk through like how they can, how you as a salesperson can work with them to solve problems they're having or help with pain points. So it's really motivation, being able to to talk consultatively with a prospect, and then I think the third one would probably be resilience. So you know, sales is hard, and it's not, it's sort of a grind. So being able to go through those lows of the sales roller coaster and stay positive and find ways to pick yourself back up to get back to the top of the roller coaster is really something that is hard to teach. So I think specifically of those three, motivation and resilience are things that are hard to teach and even coach. So those are kind of the necessities that I look for when I'm looking for salespeople.
Great. Well, we have no other questions, and I feel like that's a great way to close. We will be sending out the recording for everyone if you'd like to revisit it. Also, how you can connect with Maura on Fairy Godboss. Thank you, Maura, for your time today and excellent presentation. And thanks everyone who joined us. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.